Okay, hello everyone. In today's video we're going to see how to call platform specific code in Flutter. Flutter has great documentation and it really in detail explains for you how to do that, but if you're more like a video demonstration or a video tutorial, this is for you. So let's get into this. I'm going to be basically creating the same example that they create in the documentation, so you pretty much have all the code there, but I'll leave in the description a GitHub repository if you want to download this exact project. So here we have an empty Flutter project, the default project that gets created when you create a new Flutter application. So let me remove all these. Okay, fix that, and let me try to run the app. I'll run it on this iPhone 8 right here to see if this runs. Okay, so we get an error because our build function returns null, but let's just fix that. I'll add the scaffold and the app bar so we get a nice little display. So let me just do that. Okay, so we have our app bar here and our app looks a little bit nicer. I mean, it doesn't report any errors. So what I'm going to do now is basically get the percentage of the battery, which cannot be done through Flutter directly, but you need to call platform specific code. And I'm going to just build a button. Under it is going to be some text which is going to display the percentage of the battery. Let me just build that out real quick. We'll have a button which says click me and then text below. Okay, so here we have this very basic UI. So as you can see, here we have a material button which has some text click me, and when it's clicked basically nothing happens, an empty method. And we have our text battery level which basically has this battery level text. So let's now add the state to this page. I'll just add a member which is going to be called battery percentage, and that will be displayed on this text right here. So let me create that real quick. Okay, so here we have our text referencing this battery percentage variable. Actually, there's a typo. Now we need to handle our click event. When it clicks on this button click me, it basically needs to call our platform specific code, call our Kotlin and our Swift code, or whatever you set it to, if it's Objective-C or Java, it really depends on you. So we'll handle this click and we're going to basically call our native API. So let's see how we're going to do that. So now I'll create a method which is going to be called, I don't know, get battery information. So here we have our get battery information method, and this is basically going to go to call our native APIs and display and set our state of battery percentage to the correct battery percentage that we get, and that's basically going to be displayed. This is an async method because when we call our platform specific APIs, that's an async method, so we need to have a wait and that sort of stuff. If you really don't know that much about async code and that kind of stuff in Dart especially, Google it, check it out, but for this tutorial you really don't need to know much. Let's see how we're going to do this. In Flutter we have something that's called a method channel. Method channel is basically a group of methods, or some kind of a logical group of methods which we call, and then they execute some of our native API methods. I don't know if this really makes sense to you. So our platform channels are basically like groups of our methods that we're going to use. So maybe here we're going to have a battery method channel. So I'll create a method channel right now, which is going to be called battery channel. Okay, as you can see, we have our static variable that's called battery channel, and here we created an instance of method channel and gave it a string named battery. We need this battery value when we call our platform specific code. We're basically going to tell it like, listen for everything on battery method channel. So whatever gets called from Flutter is going to get executed. So let's see now how are we going to call our method. Okay, so I wrote this method over here. I mean, basically I copied the code from the Flutter official page, but it really doesn't matter. So here we have our battery percentage, and here's where we call a platform specific method. So the way, if you didn't get method channels yet, because maybe I did a poor job at explaining it, but whatever, you can get a method channel by like thinking about it as a class. Maybe we have a class which is called battery service or battery help, and then we call methods from that class, which is maybe get battery level. Here's how we call it: battery channel dot invoke method get battery level, and then it returns the result. That's whatever our get battery level returns. Then we set the battery percentage to that, and if an exception occurs on our platform specific code, and we just catch that over here and say fail to get battery level and print out our exception method. At the end, when we set our battery percentage local variable, we set the state of our member variable to be battery percentage. Okay, so now if I save the code, perform the hot reload, if I click, it's basically just going to throw an exception. and basically nothing happened because, as you can see here, missing plugin exception, no implementation found for method get battery level on the channel battery. So that basically means that we didn't implement our platform specific code, so it couldn't execute it, just through an exception. First, I'll implement this on Android and then we'll implement this on iOS. So I'm working in Android Studio currently, but you can be working in any IDE, it really doesn't matter. But now when we open our Android project, you will most likely, you pretty much will have to open it in Android Studio. So here we are in our project and we are going to open this Android folder and open it. Pretty much if you're using Android Studio, open it in a new window just to go back to this project later. And now let's wait for the project to open. Okay, so our Android project open. If you really don't have much experience working with Android, this may look a little bit confusing, this directory structure, but you really don't have to know much when you are doing this. Basically, you'll have to learn the stuff that you're trying to do, but it's really not that hard. So you have to go to Java, go to your package name and main activity. Here's where we'll basically register our method channels. Here we'll tell our platform specific project to listen to whatever we call from our Flutter part. So let's see how we're going to do that. Okay, so here I registered our method channel. So as you can see, this is basically how we create instances of classes. This is like if I wrote like in Dart, var method channel is equal to method channel and pass the parameters, but here I really don't have to use this anywhere, so I don't assign it to a variable. I just set that this method called handler, and it handles everything for me. So this is for our battery, so it needs to match this string battery. So this is Kotlin. It's a similar concept of the language. Syntax is a little bit different, but you shouldn't run into any trouble if you're proficient at Dart or Java or something like that. If you run into problems, Google it. It's really not a hard language, but you really don't need to learn it unless you're going to do a lot of Android development. So now we need to check which method did we call. Okay, so here I compared our call.method, which is basically going to be the method we called over here. When we call our channel.invoke method and we pass the string get battery level in this example, that's basically this. That's this call.method and we're comparing it right here. So right now we need to get our battery level. So I'll write a separate method that's going to be called get battery level, so I don't overcomplicate this on create function. Keep it simple. So I'm this is how you write functions or methods in Kotlin. If it's going to be private, you say private fun and then whatever the name is, get battery level. Okay, and here you specify the return type by adding a colon and calling it. In this case, we're going to return an integer. Okay, so now let's see how we're going to get our battery level. Okay, so we have our get battery level method, and here don't get intimidated by this code. If you really don't understand it, it really doesn't matter. So we declare our battery level and set it to be an integer, and then we check if it's lollipop or greater, because it looks like here when we're getting battery information, it's different for the versions that are lollipop and greater and for versions that are below lollipop, but it really doesn't matter. So we get our battery manager, which is just a system service, and then we get our battery level from this getIn property. And we do this a little bit differently for versions that are below lollipop, but it really doesn't matter, and we return our battery level. Seems pretty simple. Now all we gotta do is just call it right here. So let's do it. Okay, so now we basically use this get battery level method to get our battery level, and we checked if it's not -1 because we return -1. If we for some reason we cannot get battery level, we return -1. So if it's not -1, we for sure got it. And here we call this result.success. This is that result that we passed in to our lambda function, and result.success basically means this method executed successfully, return it this battery level. And if it did not execute successfully, we just call this result.error, say unavailable, battery level is not available. So it's pretty self-explanatory. Let's now try, we can run this app from Flutter or we can run it from our Android project directly. It really doesn't matter. Let's run it for Android just for fun. Okay, so I have this Nexus 5X running right here, and let's try and see if this works. Okay, so here we have our app up and running, and let's click this click me button. Okay, and it gets our battery level at 100%, which is default for Android emulator. But let's try and change our battery level manually for our emulator and see if we can. I think it's changing over here, yeah. Okay, let's change it to, I don't know, 44%. And it returns it correctly. So that's basically for our Android implementation. Now let me close this Android project since we won't need it anymore. Okay. Now we need to make an iOS implementation, and for that you must have a Mac and you need Xcode. Let me open up Xcode and I'll open up this project and then we'll work from there. Okay, so we have our iOS project open here. Let me go to our app-delegate.swift. It's in the runner directory. Here's where we'll do all our, let's say, work. So we have all of this. Let's now see. The process is very similar. It's just in the iOS way. Okay, so in our application function, we're going to be basically registering this method, what is called method channel. So let's see how we're going to do this. First, we need to get our Flutter view controller. So let's do that. We're going to reference the current controller that's here because that's apparently what our method channel needs in order to register itself. Okay, so here we initialized our controller. Now we have to create our method channel. Okay, so here we created our Flutter method channel. We passed in the name of the method channel, which should match the name over here. And also we passed our controller as a binary messenger. Honestly, I really don't know what this is. I really didn't read documentation that much, but let's see. Now we have to tell our method channel what it needs to do with the method, so let's do that. Okay, so now we created our method handler. So you kind of start to see a pattern here. We have the both call and result passed to our lambda function, just in a different way. And now we need to write basically again our logic for getting the battery level. I'll create a separate function for that and then call it over here, check if it's good. If it's not, send the result. Basically the same stuff, just different languages and different platforms. Okay, so here we have our receive battery level. Now I'm noticing that, I basically took this from the example that's on the Flutter website, and here we pass in the result and then result the date in for some strange reason, I don't know, but it pretty much does the same thing. So the only difference over here that I see is basically the way that we get our battery levels, of course because of the platform differences. But that's really besides the point. And now the only thing we need to do is call this method over here. So let's do that. Okay, so here we basically wrote everything that we need. I seen in the example it has this weak self thing. I really don't know what it is and I'm not sure. I'll look it up later, but if any of you are iOS developers, comment down and tell me what it is. But it really doesn't matter for this example. So here what we're doing, this makes sense to me. I really don't have much experience with Swift and that kind of stuff. So here we check if our call.method is get battery level, and if it is, then we let the rest of this method execute, and if it's not, it results in Flutter method not implemented. So I think that's what's going on here, and I really don't have much doubts that it's different. So this is probably some kind of a special if in Swift. I'm not really sure. I'm getting some kind of an error here. Maybe it's because of this weak self. Let me try and remove this. Okay, now I don't get any error. So let's try running this on an emulator and see what happens. Okay, so we have our app up and running right here, and a very interesting thing about this is that on simulators, on iOS simulators, we don't have access to the battery API, so here it'll just throw an exception somewhere around here and it's going to be like we cannot get the battery info. But if you were to test this on a real device, which I currently don't have, it would basically return the battery percentage, but I showed you a process nonetheless, just so you know. So let's go click me. Yeah, failed to get battery level, battery info unavailable. Okay, and I think that's basically it. I think I really showed my incompetence when it comes to iOS development, but if this video did help you in some way, drop a like, subscribe to the channel, follow me on Instagram, on Twitter, all that good stuff. I'm gonna see you next time.